later a member of the IEEE, and he received his PhD degree in applied mathematics from l'École Polytechnique in 2006 in France, and later on his PhD degree in computer science from University of Avignon and INRIA in France. So basically, his current research interests include distributed strategic learning, evolutionary game, mean field, stochastic games, and applications. So Tembin has published more than 150 scientific publications and has authored a book on distributed strategic learning for engineers. And he has also co-authored another book on game theory and learning in wireless networks. So this is what I know so far. So I don't know if he has authored more books. But together we are working on data modeling for COVID-19 with the aim to deliver for each and every African country a context-aware data modeling tool. So doing data modeling, doing context-aware data modeling is extremely important because, as you know, to combat COVID, we really need to take into account the context in which this is happening, how we are doing testing, how the mobility is happening, how the measures, the policy measures that are being taken are impacting the progression of the pandemic. So Tembin will tell us how you can take into account all those specificity of different countries when you are doing a data model. So what I would like to stress out also is that this seminar is, this webinar is the first of a series of other seminars that we're going to be organizing, most probably around COVID-19, but also beyond. So we'll try to do that every 2 weeks to bring you a new topic, which is relevant to the situation that we are living today in, and also which can help you to expand beyond this COVID area. So without any further ado, Tembin, the floor is yours. So we are ready to listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see your screen.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Youssef, for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me. It's a great pleasure and a great honor to be online to present you some of the data modeling aspect that we are studying right now on COVID-19. I would like to thank Natalie, Esther as well, and all the other team members, Kevin, and all the rest for making this possible. So the idea is that I start with this short video because that's part of the PDF, but I'm afraid that it will fail at some point. And then I will switch to the slides. So the video is this one. If you can see my screen, is the status of the worldwide status on January 22, where the virus were mainly in China and the neighboring countries, and progressively it started propagating. So because of international flights and you know, so people are taking some flight from Asia and then going to Europe and then to the US and then to the rest of America, and then last country was Africa and Australia and Africa. And progressively, the propagation you see, as you can see here in mainland China, you know, start increasing from 500 on January 22 to 80,000 25, and then it was a kind of peak that was observed in China, but then the rest of the country were starting somehow, still at that point. And then by 15th of March, you see that actually it's became pandemic in the sense that it's all around the world, including here, the beginning in Africa by March 20 or so. Now, the center moved from China to Europe, and then from Europe to the US, and then from the US to, it's going to South America now. So, so the idea here is to use this type of, to use models that can capture this type of spread and propagation. And then we look at the economic consequences. So we started this in February, beginning of February, not all the details modeling, but the basic models, and then we start reviewing. So now I will share with you the slides and then some of the outcome that we found so far. I'm switching to the slides. Okay, so the data modeling aspect. So can you see my slide?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
All right. So the data modeling aspect is a collaboration from my team members here, Dr. Julian Barrero Gomez, who is online, Dr. Salah Etienne Choutri, who is also online, my former PhD students and the former postdocs, Dr. Jiang Gao and Dr. Yida Shu, who are online as well, and previous collaborators and PhD advisors. And I would like to thank the US Air Force who is supporting us on the grant on meaningful type game theory. Actually, meaningful type game theory is going to be one of the main tool, at least driving force for this modeling. So this was really important support because we are able to fill up for the foundations of it here. And the Center on Stability and Turbulence, actually, dynamical systems are, we have chaos, stability, and transient behavior to turbulence. So this was important support, and thanks to them, we were able to carry out some of the preliminary studies. So the idea now is that I first present you in detail some of the propagation, and then I move to control and decision-making aspect, which include not only pandemic, but also economics aspect. And then final step will be on the data-driven, which will be mixing the data together with the model. And then we'll draw some conclusions. All right, so by now we have more than 5 million, 5.7 million. This was yesterday. So you can see that in terms of propagation, it's really huge. And this data is not something that we can trust, of course, but this is the most important data that we obtained so far. And data is important here. Even if it's incorrect data, it is important in the sense that we can tell them to measure more, means to test more or not based on those outputs. So data is seen here as a sampling. It's not considered as something that is perfect. It is heterogeneous, it has errors on it, inaccuracies, and under testing part of it, and so on. So we consider data as sampling, and then we filter the data and put it into a model, a dynamical system. Now, the way we build the dynamical system start from individual perspective, and then we switch to macroscopic behavior by using meaningful type game theory, which is technical theory, but it will show the convergence from the stochastic models to approximated deterministic models. And we give you the error of those type of approximation. And that's the scientific part of it. And once we have a deterministic PID, it means partial integral differential equations, then we implement those, or we implement the stochastic version. And then we compare the two and we can check the differences. I will share some of the outcomes. Now, the pandemic, as it's propagated over several countries, and it didn't happen at the same time. So we might observe in terms of total number of infection, several peak at the global level. So of course, this first kind of peak is not a general peak, but it's something that is local. And we are observing right now, we are somewhere here in most countries. But in some countries, the curve is already down. The curve of the number of active guys is already down. And some countries have observed small reinfection restarting because of community spread also. So this is the type of behavior that we observe from the data. Now, we want to see if this can be, context specific and country specific. So in some countries, we don't say this one, but we directly say this one. We see both, means here is smaller, but you still see that there is a linear term, and then there is a growth, and then there is decrease, and then small restart, and then it goes down. Well, we are not done yet in many countries, so this part is to be observed later on, and the curve will be updated based on the data. So this is the pandemic aspect at the global level, and it's estimating that more than 8 million people have been. So this is a scale of 1,000. So times 8 year, 8,000 times 1,000. So this is in the order of 8 million, which is much more than the 5.7 million. But this is because we scaled it with the model, which estimates some unreported cases and so on. So as the number of infected people goes, the capacity of the hospitals in many countries people have been trying to extend. There are a lot of effort on it. So that's why there is in terms of number of beds also, there is an increase, not a big increase, but there is a change. And then at some point when the epidemic start going down, they will close some of the extensions that were open, for example, in New York City. So this is the hospitalization aspect. And here is the economic aspect. So when the epidemic started in Asia, then the market were growing at some point. And then because of the fear of the propagation, the stock market went down, and some of the real economy in terms of transportation, for example, went down for it also. And then there is the central bank at this point. The first wave of effort from the central banks were to help companies and countries. So then the market somehow gets stabilized. And then there is a big wave of infection that started in Europe and the US. And so there is a second wave of a crash from the market. And again, a second wave, second effort from the central banks. And the economy is somehow, well, if you compare from the beginning, there is a loss, a big loss, but still it starts restarting in some countries. That's why collectively there is a kind of hope at this point. So we want to study both cases. We want to understand the economy and the pandemic and put this in the same model, not just as a separate, thing. Economy consequences are related, that are related to the COVID-19 should be part of the model. And this is what we'll try to do in this work. So the red one is the pandemic aspect, and the blue curve is the economic aspect. Now you can see that there are some correlations. If you know the events that's happened here, it's mostly because of the closure of the international flight and so on. And this one is because of the big infection that was happening. So there is a kind of correlation between the two events. Now, what do we do? So we want to include context awareness in the model. So context awareness means things that are specific to the country, specific to the city, specific to the individuals, people who are living in those cities. So we start mobility pattern because mobility is, demography and social movement are different from one country to another. So mobility is going to play a key role. Mobility means mobility at international mobility, taking flight, for example, is part of it, but also local mobility means from one city to another, from one sector of the city to another. And for an individual, we add the locality, the position of the individual, that's three-dimensional, the infection status, the age of the individual, which is important because in terms of death rates, it looks like from the data that age is an important factor. So we include that in the model. The gender, there is, from the data as well, there are some differences by gender in terms of death rates. And the family size might be a useful parameter to look at if you want to understand infection at home, for example. And one of the key thing in terms of death is actually pre-existing health condition. Means if people who have diabetes and asthma and high blood pressure, those are more vulnerable, looks like more vulnerable. So we include those people, and so that they can be isolated and we can take care of them as early as possible. And this will be done by locally in the model, and we try to match with the data and throw some recommendation. Now, in terms of modeling, we need some mathematics to estimate the probability of being infected when somebody goes outside or get close to an infectious person via a couple of aspects. So coughing, sneezing, surface contact, these are the mainly contact that was pointed out by the scientists. So we take those and we try to compute the probability of getting infected if somebody is within a certain range of a person who is infectious. And then we plug that in the compartment of exposed cases, and then propagate it to testing, for example, after a couple of days. So the testing will happen from day 2 to day 14, for example, after 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks. Now, we will include hospital capacity, testing capacity per week. We will include decision-making. So decision-making for authorities, decision-making for companies, and the decision-making for people. Now, decision for authorities means lockdown, isolation, testing strategy. Decision for firms means the number of work hours for essential, less essential, and moderate essential goods, and the quantity they want to produce. So if it's essential, for example, they want to keep the productivity so that people can be served, the demand can be served in terms of food, for example. And decision for individual means you want to decide when you go out for food or not, and decide to work or not, on site or off site, online, depending on the type of work you do. So each of these categories have to decide, and then we put them together and look at the economic and pandemic side. So when authority decide, authority has to, for example, optimize the number of, minimize the number of infection and number of death, subject to the budget constraints. So authority have to decide total budget allocation and economic incentives to firms so that we can protect jobs, to individuals directly in terms of assistance to, for food, for example, for those who are in need, and firms maximize their revenue, and they want to reduce the number of infected people at the work sites. Individuals want to avoid the virus and want also to balance with the economic outcome depending on their economic status. So an individual has to decide between consumption, how often you go outside to get food, or how often you go to work. Instead of working 5 days per week, you might want to work 2 days per week. And if so, what is the advantage and what's the inconvenience of doing so? What's the probability of getting the virus when you get close to infected people at the workplace or on your way? Firms, as I said, focus on production and revenue, and authority on budget allocation and migration constraint. All right, so with this in place, we are interested in in the total number of deaths, because this is really a big consequence from the pandemic perspective. But we are also interested in the economic losses, because if they lock down for 3 months or 4 months or so, then there will be, the economy will be affected. So both are important. We have done some survey online to get opinion from people. It looks like both are important parameters, depending on the country, of course, how important is one or the other. And the number of hospitalized or infected is also of interest, because we are limited in terms of capacity of the hospital. And so how to plan and extend the capacity is another recommendation that will come up from this result. Now, scientifically, we want to say that actually the number of deaths is something that is difficult to understand from the data. Why some countries have more deaths than others, why some rich countries are not able to handle and some poor are able, and why some sectors of people who are working are more infected, and some others are less infected, depending on the country. So it's not really the same type of data that is observed across the countries. So how to explain those things through a model, for example. And for that, we are going to use a data-driven meaningful type game theory model, which is one of the main focus we've been developing in my group and other people in the past 10 years. Now, in terms of modeling, for those who are interested in, the basic model is the SIR. This means successful infected, recovered, or removed. And when you add exposed people, it becomes SEIR. And when you can add also quarantined other compartment there to make it 4 states. You can add age structure in the SEIR. You can add location there. So you keep extending the model to capture some of the things you want to study in COVID-19. And last thing, you split removed to recovered and death. So that will extend the number of compartments so that you can have proportion of death out of the model estimation. Now you can include, you can use data to estimate some of the parameters of this model, and that will be data fitting to get the parameters. And this was, suggested. It goes back to ground Bernoulli for 2 states, infected or not, with the Bernoulli process, in the 18th century, and then Kermack and McKendrick in this 1927 for the SIR model. Now, we are not using these models because these does not capture the economy here, and it doesn't capture some of the noise aspects and some of the structures like these ones. So we will include, extend the states to include, for example, testing is one of the key thing here, testing, so that we can isolate some of the people. We can lockdown in specific countries, specific cities. Some cities will be under lockdown and some others not, and how we decide this is based on that. And so the testing will be added here as a strategy of the authority, and migration between countries, between cities will be part of the model as well. So these are not including those parameters, and that's why we propose a new model that's include decision-making into those extensions. So the model, SIR is here, SIER is here, SCR with death is here, spatial structure, age structure, and the last one is our model. So the internal status of our model is 17 states compared to the others that are 3 states, 4 states, 5 states or so. And why is 17 states is because we include gender, we include the height, we include the health condition, we include family size, we include testing, and out of our model, we can estimate the number of untested positive, means those who are infectious, but they have not been tested. So how to estimate this type of parameters. And this is really important because if the number of untested positive is big, at some point you want to, either you want to test more, or you can suggest, to the authorities, to the decision makers, lockdown or decision based on those numbers. Now, our model is, as I said, data driven. Means we are going to use the public data to do those estimations. Second part of my presentation will be on decision-making and the control of it. So I will first review the basics and then go to our model. And what is the basic? So here is the extension of the SIR. So S means suggestible, I for infected, R for recovered, D for death. And this is the evolution across time. It's a function of position, X, age, that's Z, economic status, that's E, and the T is T for time. Now, the suggestible people will be exposed, somehow get infected if they are within a certain position to somebody who is infectious at X prime. So you are at X, somebody who is infectious is at X prime, and then this is a kernel beta that says, okay, if you are within 2 meters or so, then you get exposed, and then you become infectious with this probability. And so this is the proportion of people who are moving from the suggestible to infected. Now there will be, this will be minus sign here, plus sign means they are now, it's added in the, as infectious. And then some of the infectious will be recovered, that's with the rate gamma, and some others will be recovered, will unfortunately die with the rate delta. Now what is important here is that delta depends on age, means the death rates depend on age. And it depends, of course, on the economic status as observed in some states, some countries. It depends on the country, that's why position is there. And we can run this basic model for each country, and it depends on age and depends on economic status. So this is basic extension from the classical models as proposed by Kermack and Mandelbrot. So it's a standard extension to include special cases also. And here are some references that have studied the extensions. They were not including the economic status on it, and we have extended to include the economic status. Now, how do you get gamma, delta, beta, and all those things? So for delta, there is a data. So we can go to CDC website or the World Health Organization website, and you have data for each country, delta for each country. And here is an example. So this is the age from 0 to 100 years. It could go to 104 or 5. So from the data is from 0 to 95 or so. And so this is the data. And then here is the rate. It's not normalized. It's just the rate. It's not the probability. And then the curve is what we suggest in the model. So the model should capture what is going on in the data somehow. And we plug that, and then we get a more robust model because it's based on data to generate this type of model where you include now mobility, migration from one area of the city to another. This is more technical, so I will move to next. What is decision making? Well, for an individual, you introduce a number of infectious people around a person, and then you want to minimize you want to maximize the probability of not getting infected. So staying successful, you are healthy, and you want to minimize the number of deaths, of course. And there are some costs. So if you are in a place that is more infectious, then there is a high risk for you. So this term is minimizing, is saying that it's adding that cost. And then there is a economic benefit, and that's represented by the term here. So you have economic benefit minus cost that you want to minimize over time. So this is, we start at T0 and we finish at T1. Although T1 is not known, T0 is known as January 22, for example. Now, the connection with meaningful games is that actually you can start from the stochastic model and show that it converges to a deterministic equation, and then we give you the error. And this, I will provide you a couple of examples for those who are interested. Now, meaningful type add the risk awareness in the model, means that we are reducing the risk. We want to minimize, for example, the variance, and this is what this slide is trying to extend. Here are the references in terms of the existing work in meaningful games. And it goes back to Jovanovic, who first started meaningful games, and not with the name, but anonymous sequential games, which is really meaningful games, where the key idea is to to optimize with and the optimality is given by Bellman equation, and the movement of the population, the propagation, is given by Kolmogorov equation. And we'll build up our theory based on the work by Ivanovich and Rosenthal. And meaningful type deviate from that theory to add risk awareness on it, distribution dependent payoff. And this is for one decision makers, couple of references, and the competitive meaningful type game theory. For those who remember my presentation in Rwanda, I love competitive games. In general, competition is one of my favorite. And here are some of the work we were first to introduce this literature. Yes.
Allow me to stop you. There are few direct questions. So do you allow them, or you prefer to have them in
the end? Yeah, I can take them now if it's short.
Okay, let's do that then. So Solomon, you can ask your question. Solomon, you are muted. Yeah.
You can type it if somebody can type on the screen so that Yusuf can read it maybe.
So Solomon, ask your question.
I think Solomon can write it and then we'll see it on the chat. But there was also someone else who asked what was the value for infection transmission and what was better. So I think it was on previous 2 slides when you were starting to explain the whole equation.
Yeah, so the infection for successible infected, recovered, and death, these are obtained from the dynamics that is here. So here you see successible, infected, recovered, and death. So these are coming from the model, from the dynamics. And the model is built based on data as well. Okay. Maybe I should continue, and at the end we can have more discussion. Let's move on. Yusuf?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So references for meaningful type game theory are here. This is the meaningful type control part, and then meaningful type games. As I said, from 2014 to now, you see the development, and it's very exciting area. And different models, different methods to solve them have been proposed: maximum principle, dynamic programming, direct method, and other type of method proposed by collaborators and our group. So now, in terms of modeling for the COVID-19, we are basing our work in those 4 references. The first one is about malware propagation. That's networking, means that you want to see the propagation over a graph, which is the key here, actually, how to move from one country to another, one city to another. So that's the key. And we have developed a theory for it, convergence theory, and then we use now that model to extend it to the COVID-19 cases we are studying. Other applications include, bio-inspired evolutionary games, and goes back to my earlier work, and application to reaction networks. And last but not the least, this was on spatial structure and propagation of corruption. And corruption is somehow a kind of virus as well. And we have included decision making there, and the consequences of the decision making in terms of corrupting people or not. Now, why do we need model? How to use those models? So if you have a city with, let's say, 1,000 people, there is a chance that actually your SIR will not work. And here is an illustration. So the number of people is very small. Your data is really is not reliable or too random. So what the model says and what is observed might be different. Now, if the population is 10,000, means 10 times more, your model start getting accurate, somehow getting it more reliable. So this means that if we take for each country and population, the population size is going to play a role in terms of modeling error at last. So which model to choose, how is it reliable? Well, that will be based on the Markov chain Monte Carlo that we are using, and then connection with the ODE, the deterministic model. So this deterministic versus stochastic, and they become both reliable if the number of population, the population size is somehow more important. Now, 10,000 you might say is nothing, but actually it's important because we are trying to understand the propagation of the virus in smaller cities, in rural areas, for example. How does it spread? Community spreads, how does it happen also? And therefore it should be applied locally instead of taking the global infection population. Worldwide it says 5 million, but actually in my village it's only 2 infection and it stopped. So how to understand this type of behavior? Now, if we generate with 3 states, here is an example of propagation where it doesn't converge to a steady state. It's not stable, but it converges to a limit cycle. For those who are familiar with chaos theory, so this is the type of thing that says that even this simple case can be very quickly a complex study for researchers, because if you have a limit cycle, you want to identify the limit cycle, what the duration of the cycle or so. And this is from one of our previous work where we look at the variations. For some parameters, it is stable, and for some other parameters, it is unstable. Unstable means it's going to the limit cycle. It doesn't go to steady state. Here is an illustration in terms of mobility. So you are connected to some graphs. This is the graph between cities, for example. And then if there is a flow, there is traffic from one city to another. And if there is no lockdown, so this is the case without lockdown, you see that the infection is much higher than if you do a lockdown. So if you do a lockdown, its size is very small. But lockdown means also economic consequences. So here we are interested, we are plotting only the infection. So you see that on the right, that the number of infections is much smaller than on the left. That's why lockdown was suggested. But lockdown means also it comes with some economic consequences that we'll consider next. All right, so these are reviews, quick reviews of what we were doing in the past. And now I start reviewing what we are doing now. Now we are doing the COVID-19 modeling. And our key step in solving the system we'll propose will be based on a deep learning machine. And the deep learning, is a hot topic right now. And why we use this? Well, in terms of modeling, it's also help us to understand, from the robustness perspective. So distributionally, deep generative adversarial network is one of the tool that we are going to use. And here is a paper that appears in March 2020, one of my paper on deep learning. So for those who are interested in the details, you can go and find this online. Now, the model starts with the 3 decision makers. The first is the authority. The authority decides on lockdown, as I said, lockdown, isolation, and so. This is represented by 3 parameters because location is split into country level and then city level and migration between cities. So and the sector for each of the city. So country level, city level, and country level means international connectivity. Authority can reduce or complete lockdown. City level means authority can decide to put under lockdown a specific city or a specific area of the city. Now, authority decide also on testing strategy. It means how many people will be tested per week, and there is a cost associated to it. Authority finally decides on economic incentives and the tax rate. So economic incentives means you might want to assist to those who are vulnerable with food. You might want to reduce taxes for some companies. You might want to assist some banks via the central banks or so. So this part is the benefits, the assistance that people get, and this part is the tax rates. You might want to reduce or increase depending on specific essential, less essential, or moderate essential goods. Now, the objective of the authority, these are decision-making part, but the objective will be to reduce number of deaths or to to reduce the economic losses, depending on the objective of the authority. Some countries, for example, have made decision on number of deaths, reducing number of infected, and some other countries more on the economic side, and some are balancing between the two. So we want to capture those things. Now, the firms look at the type of, depending on the sector they are, this can be classified as essential, moderate essential, less essential goods. But actually we don't agree on what is essential and on what is not. But the idea is that depending on those classification in the country, this can be very quickly incorporated in the model. You can transfer something that was considered as essential to be moderate essential, for example, or less. And the decision makers here, decision as a firm, want to decide on the total work hours for essential goods, for example. And this will be reduced dramatically for less essential goods, and the budget constraint, and optimize the profit, the revenue. That's for firms. Now for individuals, each individual decide on its meeting rate. Like when you go outside, you want to decide to go out or not. You can decide on your movement with a certain, this is position, this is velocity. The last one is acceleration. And you can decide on consumption, economic consumption. So total consumption per week, for example, to reduce or not, to keep it to essential things or not. This is part of the decision of the individual. Now, individual wants to reduce the risk of being infected, risk of being exposed, and reduce also the economic losses. And here is example of economic benefit. Here, when you work with work hours A1, and the salary wage rate is W, and what you get as benefit from government is LS, lump sum from government, G is for government, and tax rate from government is TR, then you get this benefit. It's a utility from. Now, in terms of pandemic, it has also a benefit if you are not infected, of course, but it has a cost. So the cost is when you might be exposed, and this is the exposition part. And infectious means you get exposed when you are close to somebody who is infectious. And the risk awareness here is captured by the variance of those parameters that you are choosing. You want to reduce the variance. Now, if you put all this together, you get your main field dynamics, which is given by location, position, infection status, age, and C. C means pre-existing health condition, gender, the other parameters, family size, economic status also, and the time. So you want to understand how this propagates over time, and this will determine the spread of the virus in each country, each city, each sector of the city, and that's really context aware. Because it depends from one country or another, it depends on from one city to another, it depends on the age structure on that city or so. So the infection status is split into 17 compartments, and here are some of them: susceptible, testing positive, testing negative, isolation at home, hospitalized, recovered, death, and so on. So there are in total 17 countries, and I will describe them now. So these are the 17 countries. Susceptible is here. And when you go out or when you get close to somebody who is infectious, you get exposed. And from exposed, after a couple of days, some of them will go for testing. If it's tested, it could be negative, it could be unclassified, or it could be positive. And if it's positive, we do contact tracing. Means all the people who have been in close contact with that person the last 2 weeks will be contacted over phone or over any existing technique there locally. The authorities will try to contact those, as many as they could, and then ask them questions and maybe ask them for testing, right? So this part is really important. But unfortunately, some others are not tested. So they get exposed and they get the virus, but they are not tested. And among them, some of them become really sick, and these are active cases. And the others, some of others will be recovered. That's fantastic. And some of them, unfortunately, might die. So that's D here. So this is untested death, untested positive, untested recovered also. And then for those who are tested positive, so they might be isolated at home, quarantined at home, at the point of care, or at hotel, depending on the country. And among those, there is a transition to some of them will be recovered and some others will be hospitalized. And among the hospitalized, some of them will be recovered again, or some of them will die. Now, these are all 17 countries that we propose in our model. It has been tested among, people were asking what is the difference with SIR? Well, for SIR, there is no testing. So you can just take successible here and then infect it as this term and then recover here, and this becomes SIR. It will be reduced to 3 states here. So we just enable some of the compartment and you get the SIR. And you can make this one stochastic as a Markov chain. You can make ODE as a deterministic as you want. And we know the convergence rates for this. You can extend to SEIR with 4 state. You can make it with added depth to it. You can add 5 state SARD and a couple of extensions. This is the dynamics of all the 17 states. Where we look at the inflow and the outflow, and it's given by a Kolmogorov equation. This is more technical, but I just want to show you that we have the details. And now here is the evolution. So susceptible number of people will go down when the epidemic starts because there are some infections going on. So they move from susceptible to exposed to other compartments. So it start going down. And then the number of active goes up and then down, and a second time up, depending on the parameters, depending on community spread also. Number of hospitalized goes up and then down and so. So these are all the 17 states, their evolution from the model. This is another range of parameters to see that the first peak, the first small peak is not really a peak, and then the epidemic really start after that, and to tell you that we can observe this type of behavior. And if you use standard SIR, you cannot observe this first peak and second peak, because SIR, the model is reduced, so because of the steady state constraint on the model, you cannot observe this type of non-Gaussianity. So this is not Gaussian. And SIR as a shape that goes up and down only. It cannot do second time up. So when you put all of this together, you get the evolution, as I said, from L1, L2, L3. L1 means country index, geographical coordinate. L2 is city. L3 is area of the city. So it's really details. And then X is even more details, is the geographical position. X is the position in L3, in that area of the city. V for velocity, A3 for acceleration, A2 for probability of going outside, and A1 for the work hours, the number of work hours. These are decisions from individual, these are decisions from authority who can decide on migration. So authority decide on eta1, eta2, eta3. Eta1 is the international flight, eta2 for mobility from one city to another, eta3 from one area of the city to another, through motorcycles, cars, buses. So that's eta3 if you want to reduce those. So the authority can decide on all those parameters just by saying that, okay, there is a lockdown and no migration, the road will be closed, or so under lockdowns, eta1 will be 0, nearly 0. Only a social flight will be there, like flight for, or things that are related to agriculture or so. That will be eta1. So nearly 0. Right now it's nearly 0 across many countries. Eta2 will be migration from one city to another. So that's not 0 in many countries, but slightly reduced. And we capture through the data these things. Now I add the map constraint, because this is really important. It's not about just doing mathematics, it's about capturing what is going on the map. So there will be slightly big constraint in terms of the dynamics that people are used to. If you put all together, you get this type of equation, which I don't want to go into the details. If there are questions at the end, we might come back on it. One important thing in terms of modeling is the number of how to model from susceptible to exposed. And this is the one that is based only on distance. I remove the economic status, and that is in the general formula. So if you consider only distance, so you need a kernel. You are at position X, this guy is at position X, And at X prime, there is somebody who is infectious. And infectious means passive, active, tested positive, but at home, at a point of care, at a hotel, or at hospital. Now, then you integrate this, and then you get a term that is probability of getting exposed. And this is the probability that you are there at X. So then this is the total probability of moving from susceptible to exposed. And now once you are exposed, you get a certain probability to be infected, and then you might be tested or not, and the rest of the 17 states follow. Now, example of kernel is take the distance to be 2 meters away, take epsilon to be 2 meters. So if you are within a certain distance of 2 meters away, then this gives you 1, means it's counted, and otherwise it's become small or it's just 0. All right, so, and then we have the general model. We start with the data. We estimate the parameters that are presented in the model, the lambda parameters and the transition rate. And once you have the transition rate, then you get your model, plug them in the model, you get a data-driven model. Once you have the data-driven model, you need to go and make decision-making. Decision-making for authorities, decision-making for firms, decision-making for individuals. And for that, you need to solve the optimization problem. And once you solve the optimization problem, you have those optimal decisions, and then you can make a recommendation to the decision makers for them to implement or not. They might be able to implement some of the optimal decisions, but some others are not implementable because they are very costly. So that's why we capture the cost in the model so that they can be implementable, well, closer to be implementable, right? Now, how do we calibrate such a model? Well, we start with the data. The data is 5 times 195 countries, and that is available online. These are the number provided, the officially UN members and so on, but the total number in the data is more than 195, but we consider only the 195. And then from the data, we do estimation theory. We are using filtering, and now it means we need to minimize this optimization problem to get the parameters of the model. And once you have the lambda parameters, the transitions, you plug that in the data, in the model, and then you get the data-driven model from this line. And now you run this dynamics, you solve this dynamics using the deep learning, or your favorite tool in C++, because mobility is involved, so you want less heavy algorithms, and then run this on a daily basis because we have the data updated every day. So this is our data-driven model, complete description. In terms of implementation, so as I said, you take 195 countries, a population for each of the country is available online. You have the map for each of the country, although some of the maps are not updated. So recently I was giving a talk in Morocco and they said, well, your map is not considering Western Sahara or so. So I apologize for those maps that will be updated later on. But you have a map and you can display on that map. Total population size will be around this number, just an estimate. Nobody knows how many we are, but it makes sense to consider official data. And international connectivity is available from the flight radar. So you have all the connections, all the important connections, you can get the data online. And the decision made by authorities is from the AMF website. You can get the important decisions that were declared there. And we realize that some of them have not been implemented in practice. So you need to add the surveys and how well it's implemented, look at the severity of it, look at the quality of experience, and then slow down, some of the parameters and fit with the reality. And then last step will be cost benefit, how to design the cost and benefit for firms, individuals, and authorities. The mobility map is from the open street. So we need the number of people at hotspot, and connectivity data have been provided by the social networking or telecommunication or transportation data. AMF, World Bank, and so on provide you other type of data on comorbidities. This is pre-existing health condition per country, and some of them are public and some others unfortunately are not. and then build up the model based on important prevalent conditions like diabetes, depending on the country, because for some countries it's cancer, for some others it's diabetes, some others is obesity, some others are hypertension, and so on. So this is the display as of March 30 on the status, and this is local mobility. So here is usually few people infected, and here is how it's propagated from, you know, if you look at the mobility map, status for India. So this is for India. You look at here, the propagation of the virus, infection, and then recovered, and then death. You see that the model capture actually what is going on in India. And untested people are not displayed here because it will create, you know, they might not be happy that I display the untested cases. But in the model, the important characteristics of the data that is provided there. This is for Spain. So proportion of confirmed cases, active cases, recovered cases, death in Spain. This is to say that when you add a decision, you can lower down compared to the data. This is now to conclude that actually, because the time is running out. So we are doing a data-driven model. We include control, we include economic aspect as well as pandemic aspect, and we are including decision-making to solve as a, you know, multiple games within the game, what we call games of games or systems of systems. So that's it, but I have the last slide to show for Africa. So Africa, so I start with South America and then we'll show for Africa. South America, so here is Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, Cuba, Guatemala, Haiti, Mexico, now Asia, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia. So Malaysia, for example, you see multiple waves from the old model versus new model. Pakistan, UAE, Germany, now Europe, Italy, Russia, again, Spain, again. And this is sampled from Africa. This one is West Africa, and this one from East Africa, this one from, again, West, this one from South Africa. And this is the total modeling with the data. This is for Algeria now, Africa. There are the details for Africa. Now, Algeria, Angola, Botswana, Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Chad, Djibouti, Egypt, Eritrea, Eswatini, Swaziland, Ethiopia, Gabon, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, so Kenya, Liberia, Libya, Madagascar, Malawi, Mali, Mauritania, Mauritius, and Morocco, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Seychelles, Somalia, South Africa, Sudan, Togo, Tunisia, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe. All right, so that's it. Thanks for your attention. I will be happy to take your questions now.
Thank you, Tembine. I think we're going to start with Hassan. He had multiple questions. I think he can go ahead and start, and then we'll read the other one.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Tembin, for the presentation. Very nice. Sorry for the background noise. I will go fast. So 2 questions, Tembin. In the model, I see that you have the locality, but is weather taking into account? Because I mean, some people are saying that the bad predictions that we had for Africa, the million of deaths, did not happen because of the weather. I mean, some people are saying that. Can it be included? And also in the decision-making process, you have the government, you have the people, individuals. But what happened, I mean, especially in Senegal, for example, is that we have community leaders that when they put on a mask, everybody puts a mask. Can you include something like that, kind of mass decision, and how does it help the model, and how does it change the results?
Very good question. Actually, so protection, sanitation, mask, and so on are important, part in terms of probability of getting exposed. Or if you meet somebody who is already infectious, if that person is protected, it's might protect you as well. And if you are protected and you are entering in an area that is infectious, then your exposure is less. So this appears, in terms of modeling, it appears in the probability of getting exposed. So now you don't know if this is efficient or not, because it's just probabilistic. It's not because you are wearing just a mask and, mask is about nose and mouth, but you have to protect also the eyes. So it's, you need to cover the entire, and if you cover everywhere, you might not be able to see, and you need special mask, right? It's something that where you can wear and you can see. So complete combination. But the thing is, in the model, to capture this, we look at, for example, the term that I present, that's beta, means the probability of getting exposed if people wear a mask versus if they don't wear. And there you might say that, okay, the probability of getting exposed is reduced when they are wearing the mask. So that's how you capture it. But the key thing is, you want to know if they are really, if this is really implemented in the city. Because you might decide that, okay, everyone should wear a mask, but when you go on the street, you see that people are not doing that. So, or so, especially in the local markets, which I didn't have time to zoom here, but if you go in the local market across many countries in Africa, people are not really respecting those rules. So we slow down, we say, okay, in this country, authority decided a mask is mandatory. So therefore we say, okay, it will be applied at a rate like 80%. 80% of the people in city are doing that, let's say, instead of 100%. So, and then we put that in the model saying that, okay, the probability of getting exposed is reduced by 20% or so for that specific country. And that's how we see reduced number of infections in the model. I don't know if this answers to your question.
Okay. About the weather?
Weather, yeah. So another important parameter is weather, but not, so in the model, I didn't highlight that part. So there is a weather already part of the model, as we thought that, not as an epidemiologist point of view, but we thought that weather influences the duration of the lockdown. When it's very nice, it's not the same as when it's not nice. So hot weather, for example, if you do lockdown for 3 months without any assistance, and very bad weather, bad in the sense that it's extremely hot, it might not work. So in that sense, we capture weather through the lockdown decision. Now, what's the influence of weather in terms of virus propagation also? This, we don't have a clear view, because so far, the scientific paper that have been published are not complete yet. There are a lot of ongoing work and published papers, but they are not really clear on the impact of weather in terms of epidemic consequences. Means probability of for the virus to die, or the virus never die, but I mean the RNA to move out or decrease the viral charges also. So that part is not clear. So we are not yet including in the model that part, but we included temperature as a decision for authorities to on the duration of the lockdown, or no lockdown, depending on the, because even if you do lockdown, they respect less, and you have less difficulty to contain the people. So that's why we include temperature in the lockdown, not in the epidemic aspect, because that part is unclear. And if at some point we understand better the role of the temperature in the virus, then we'll be able to include as a specific thing to the COVID-19.
Thank you, Tembini. Another question from Hab. He was asking if you included any biological indicators in your model, and which ones. I'll probably give an overview.
In terms of
biological indicators.
No, not that. I don't. I didn't so far. The only thing we have considered is the pre-existing the comorbidities. These were shared from the data, so we took the public data as it is. But except that, we didn't include any aspect in that direction. Not so far.
Okay, perfect. So for everyone who's attending, if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, and then I'll be able to allow you to talk. But Joseph also in the chat asked, how do you account for multiple cities within a country and the related parameterization that may be involved?
Yeah, so here is an example. So this is the map for Colombia, and you see multiple cities, and then you see migration from one city to another. So the data will be provided by for example, by the authority on the number of people taking this road or that road, how many people are leaving the city or not. So this will be the map on the right. And then so the migration is, so if it is under lockdown, it means this migration is reduced, because it's not zero, because there are still, we need food or so there are some people, like the drivers, for example, are leaving one city to another. So there is a small traffic going on, the one that are authorized. And that small traffic actually might disseminate the virus, as we have observed in many countries in Africa, through those drivers. And then there is a community spread in the other city. Even one single person can infect and then start propagating, right? So that's how we include in the dynamics. Each city has its own dynamics, and then you have a flux from, you flow from one country, one city to another through the Kolmogorov equation that I shared earlier. Over.
Okay, thank you. The other questions around government interventions were around, one is there's different social distancing rules, 1 meter, 2 meters. Are you taking into consideration those policy implications? But also on a larger aspect, include trade, international or inter-country trade in the government decisions as part of the parameters that you're including.
Yeah, so here is the physical distancing. So we include the physical distancing in the model by just setting up 2 meters distance, 1.5 or 2, depending on the country. So you fix the epsilon to 2 meters, and then this is the distance between the person who is infectious to your position. So if the distance is less than 2 meters, then you get exposed. So it doesn't mean that you get the virus, so you get exposed. And some of the people who get exposed will get infected with a certain probability. So we consider physical distancing on it. And physical distancing is, either we take from the survey from the data, or we just say that, okay, in this specific country, there is no data available, so therefore we just inject this kernel into the model. So we do model-based, completely model-based, or data-driven model-based in terms of physical distancing. Over.
Jean-Claude, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. My question was about migration. I want to know which data are you considering on migration?
Several data. So first, to understand the propagation, how we move from epidemic infectious disease to a pandemic, that can be explained through the flight data, and the flight data is available online here from this website. This is public. You can see for all countries, you have more than 4,000 flights. You can, right now you just connect and you'll see all the data going on there. So you take this one to explain the propagation of the virus from those who are traveling from one country to another at the beginning, not now, but in the beginning we had that. And so for the spread at the international level is from this data. Now the local spread is more complicated because we need, that those data are not public. So we need to do country by country, and that's why we are having some data from some countries, but some others are not giving their data. So we go and take it from here, the OpenStreetMap, and then there we have the hospitals, we have some of the hotspots, we have some local shops, we have some local market, but it's not complete. That data is not complete and probably outdated in some countries, but still useful for some other countries. So we take this data because this is available, but the others are, we need to work with the authorities country by country and have more accurate mobility data. So in particular, if the country provide the hotspot and the mobility at those hotspots, then we plug that in the data, and then we want to capture the migration through the migration rate. That's eta here. So this is the migration rate from one city to another is L2. Eta 2 is migration from one city to another. This is the one who are coming to that city. This is the one who are leaving that city. And same, this is the international connectivity is eta 1, and local from one area of the city to another area of the city is eta 3, right? So it's involved all the parameters, in terms of mobility, to different, cars, buses, metro, if there is any, and motorcycles also, different modes of mobility. And we include also the testing per area. The testing depends on the area as well, specific area of the city and the capacities. Over.
So Tembine, before you move, I give someone else a chance to ask a question. There was Dumbia who asked about the reliability of the data. I think you were just starting on that, especially in African countries. If you saw any particular inconsistencies in the models based on if the data was reliable or not.
Very important question. I don't know, if some people report the data is public data, and I don't know what is reliable from what is not, and it's really very difficult to know that. We can start criticizing some countries who have less and so on. From the model, I can detect something, but I'm not aware. I'm not aware of all the information. So in general, I don't consider the data as reliable. Not from developed or underdeveloped countries. It doesn't matter. For me, I consider data as, a sampling. It's just statistic sampling. So I will never take it as something that is correct or close to correct. No way. So data is just a sampling. And then based on this sampling, you build up your filtering and the extrapolation or estimation model. So that's the best way to go, because if you start saying, okay, in this country is measured accurately, in this other is not, you realize that actually some of the countries we are considering as accurate, actually they are not that accurate. They are underreporting a lot of things because of other decisions, like political decisions, or you report at a later stage when the political opportunity is away or so. So as a person who does modeling, we consider data as a noisy, inaccurate data, as a sample data. Over.
Thank you. Can I ask Tabang if you can go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, how are you? Tabang in South Africa. I just want to know, it looks very computationally heavy. How heavy has it been? And since you spoke of the politics of it, is there any, some type of adoption that you can, see forward? Like, is there any country that you think they might adopt it if possible? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. So it looks like it's heavy, but actually if you remove the international connectivity, because that's very low now, it's very low. So in the beginning we had international connectivity through countries, travels. So this was reduced. So you remove all the international connectivity, you make them very small then you can parallelize. And when you parallelize, you are at the country level. Now, even at the country level, you can parallelize at the city level, right? And add the migrations, the people who are moving from one city to another. So typically when you parallelize, then the complexity is almost away, because you'll be able to run from one sector of the city to another sector of the city in parallel simultaneously. So that's the best way to move to reduce the complexity. So it's not heavy because of the possibility of being parallelized, and it's not heavy because we are considering the deterministic model once we put prove that the stochastic and the deterministic the error is close enough. And the error is obtained is at the order of 1 over n. N is the population size of that country. So if the population size exceeds 1 million, the model is precise enough. That's you see. So then you can parallelize. So the stochastic model is precise when the population size exceeds 1 million, because you get in the order of -6, 10 to the -6. So that's gives you a small error. And then you run the deterministic one, and then you just run ODE over a map, and you discretize the map into a graph. Then you get a big graph because of the location aspect is important. So that's consumed a lot of time. But since it's an ODE and you parallelize the ODE and you see that, and then you add the flux from one area of the city to another, it goes very fast, relatively fast, depending on the size of the map, of course. Over.
Thank you, Tembini. I think we'll take the last 3 questions, which are already in the chat. So Stefan asked if there's any credibility in prediction that Africa will be the worst hit continent with over 300,000 deaths. So based on your model, do you think this is credible or not? And Joseph again asked to what extent do your results mirror the current pandemic trends across African countries?
Very good questions. So in terms of prediction, it's much more complicated. Even for developed countries, it's really complicated. It's difficult to predict. I don't suggest those who are anticipating that there will be a certain number of deaths here and there. Well, I don't suggest to do a long-term prediction. The reason is that if you look at our experience in terms of prediction, just for weather, we don't know the weather of tomorrow. And how can I have the correct prediction for something that will be in 3 months or 4 months or so? So in terms of prediction, it's not that accurate. Or people can do the prediction by just running the ODE, but it's not really, there is no reliability on those things. So, but what is reliable is to do a short-term prediction. For example, the number of infected people in the next couple of days, the number of hospitalized people in the next couple of days, so that you can do a planning and take care of those patients who will be joining. So this type of thing you could do. So the model is useful in that sense. Do a now casting, do a short-term casting, and then make a decision quickly on those. Now, you can analyze as somebody who work on modeling, analyze the long-term behavior of the dynamical system and say that, okay, the epidemic will be over in 4 months or so, because number of hospitalized people is below a certain number. But this is not accurate because the decision that will happen next are unknown. Authority might relax some of the lockdown, and then you don't know what will be the behavior. Is there any new community spread because of those relaxations or so? So this type of thing are not predictable in advance, unless if authority says, okay, at this step we'll do this other step we'll do that. So that's we call strategy of the authority. So if authority say that will be under soft lockdown at this step, and then testing will come and identify, isolate, and so, then you include there, and then it will be more precise. But this means forward-looking dynamics, a dynamics that involve the feature on it. So you do filtering for forward-looking dynamics, and that's open questions, even for the most advanced scientists in the field. Over.
So Dorcas she's asking, what is the ideal predictive window, this short-term predictive window? What is the ideal number of days you're talking about?
So in the model, we have tested across 66 countries here. We can do prediction. So for some countries, 10 days is a good window. For some other countries, it can go up to 1 month in terms of prediction. It was so far reliable, 1 month for some other countries. But 10 days for most of them, most of the countries.
Perfect. So the last question is about, can the model help define the best or optimal authority decision that can minimize both the spread of infection as well as the economic impact in a certain country?
Important question. So the model gives the decision making for individuals, for authorities, and for firms, for companies. Now, if they all optimize and solve the optimization problem, the model says that, okay, the number of infected people will be really very low. You can imagine that if there is a lockdown between the first week of the infection in China, will not be where we are now. So you can understand when it is optimized, it will be really very, very low. But the optimized version is not quickly implementable because we are human. We respond, with a certain delay. So the model is capturing the delayed effect, means that the reaction appears after a certain time. For example, from the end of December to early February, we took a certain delay in terms of decision making. Now that means that it's not the optimal behavior that was implemented, is already another behavior. So what we do is we start from that point where decision making started. Some effort in terms of decision making were done by the authorities, and then we are modified from there, and then we redo again. So we say, okay, starting point is here, we are already here. Now we do the prediction window for the next for the dynamics that start from that point typically. And then when you optimize again, you can slow down, even though a lot of people are already infected, you can slow down the propagation of the virus because individuals will go out less because of the risk of getting infected. Firms will start closing themselves, even without intervention, because they look at the infection going high. And at some point, they will start relaxing because they need to survive. So they will say, okay, now economic consequences are more. So there is a kind of a balancing effect. So we plot for example, the economic consequences versus the pandemic consequences, and firms will decide on it depending on specific category of the firms. And then authority has the testing strategy, which means the number or the rate of tests per week, and in terms of the capacity of testing. So they might test more or less, but this is also costly because if you test more, behind it, it's not free. I mean, for the state, it's not free. So that's why some countries, well, they want to do a test, but actually they are not doing because they say, well, the test is very expensive. Although we are getting, cheaper test kits and so on now. So my recommendation is the following, and what we observe so far is that the optimal strategy is not implemented in most countries. And not just because it's not implemented for some of them, but for some others, it's really not possible to implement it. So then the question in terms of modeling is that, can you go back into the model and put the economic consequences with a certain weight? Because when you do that, then it's explained that, okay, the optimal is now shift because this country is considering more economic aspect than the pandemic aspect, and that's why their behavior is this way. So the model can do that, but it changes, the utility functions, it changes, the cost functions I presented before. So there are some weights there to measure, and the author is up to the decision from the authority on their choice in terms of pandemic versus epidemic. Over.
Thank you. Solomon, are you able to ask your question now? Okay, so I'm still trying. You're on mute, Solomon. So if you can unmute yourself, but okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Tembin, this is Natalie. I just want to capture some of the questions in the Q&A. So there's a question about herd immunity. Does the model predict or capture herd immunity? There's another question around, it's a question that you've already answered, but maybe the way to ask is, can the model tell us what countermeasures are best on the continent? And how accurate is your model based on the current situation? I think if you could answer those for now.
very good questions. So the accuracy of the model is, for example, here in the if you can see still the slides. We look at in terms of epidemic. We look at 17 states, and the model can capture the reported data in most countries. Now, for the unreported cases, because the model also estimates the number of unreported positive cases and the number of deaths that have not been reported or so. So those are unreported. So there is no way so far to check you know, the reliability on those, but these are estimations. Now, on the data that is reported, you can verify that for 66 countries, that the model is accurate enough in terms of error is very small. You can see, for example, here that there is almost you know, the error is really very small. So that's one way to validate the model, is that it's work for some countries. And for these other countries, the model is able to detect that, okay, unreported cases are very high in this country and the reported is very small, so something wrong going on. So then we can propose or suggest something based, for example, in terms of testing strategy or so. So one way is to say that we use a model to understand something, to detect something in the data. The other way is we use data to build up a better model. So we are on both directions. It's a closed loop approach that we are considering here to validate our model. The closed loop is here. So you see, we use data to build up the model, but also use the model to learn more from the data. So this is the learning process. It's not just one way or the other. We don't decouple the model from the data. We learn from data, and then we learn from the model as well. Over.
And are you able to suggest measures that are working based on your review of the data? And quickly, just about herd immunity.
Yeah, so in terms of immunity, you know, this is a strategy of the authority. So it means that you are more flexible in terms of decisions on lockdown or so, and then you help people in terms of economic incentives. And then you might say, okay, more people will be infected and some of them will be recovered. And those who are recovered, you build up a treatment, you build up, in order to help the one who are still hospitalized, or in order to understand the antibodies or so. So this is a strategy of the authority. We can put different strategies. So in the modeling aspect, we put different strategies and then do some comparison. So it might say that actually, if authority, decide that they don't do any lockdown, like for example in Sweden, this happened, the infection will be at a certain level, but then the individuals will react differently. So it's not, it's not just limited to the authority. Individuals will say, okay, since there is no lockdown in my country, I myself start, behaving, differently, right? So I might say, okay, a lot of people might be infectious because the government is testing less, or because we are not under lockdown because of tourism or because of mobility from other cities nearby. So individuals will react, and the response from those individuals is not correctly understood because we don't understand correctly human behavior, not yet. We want to understand that, but this is not really captured in the model. Not captured because it's not measured in that sense. So we can plug a mobility dynamics there, but it might not capture what is going on there because there is no data that was measured in this direction. So this is like a research topic. And this will be crucial in order to determine later if immunity is a good strategy to follow or not. Right now, we cannot answer to this because we have any data missing. So the model can be run for different strategies. And then we say, okay, if there is no lockdown, here is the output. If there is a lockdown, here is the output. And then we are left with the uncertainty on the response of the individuals. Over.
So does this mean that the model does not allow us to say what countermeasures are working best for each country?
No. So the model does not tell you that, because the model can tell you only when you fix and you look at the output, but actually there are other parameters that are not measured, as I said. So it will say, okay, if you do lockdown, it will say that actually the most important is at which time you make that decision. Because you can do a lockdown when it's too late. And what happens is that infection will be happening now at home, because most people are infected, so they will start infecting at home. So you make a lockdown decision, but actually it's almost useless because people are already infected. So the time at which you react, for example, earlier decisions were observed in many countries. Taking decision at early stage is very important, much more than the lockdown itself, actually. And when you make the decision at the right time, then you can contain and you can do a certain number of containment measures for each sector. So you don't need to do a global lockdown, but identify for the sector by sector and specific isolation strategy for that sector. But now, if you don't do at the right time, the epidemic propagator, you already have community spread, and then when you have community spread and you do a lockdown, then people will go home, and at home they start infecting the family members or so. So you will get more and more infection, but now at home, and then again hospitalized. The number of hospitalized will go. So the effect of the lockdown will not be seen as expected because it's happened too late. Now, the other thing is that actually some countries, they do the lockdown, but it's a soft one. Means that it's only at night. I observed that in many African countries. So a curfew at night, and then during the day there is a flexibility. So it looks like the virus will not move at night or so. So people, which is ridiculous. So it's not effective. So in terms of lockdown, there is no clear idea on what is the best, because there is no follow-up, because there is no data on the response of the people to those lockdown, and because the consequences in terms of economics are affecting the efficiency of the lockdown, because some of them will say we have to reopen because of the economy, and then they don't respect the lockdown. So that's the thing in terms of lockdown so far, based on our recent experience. Over.
So we're running out of time, but we have a question around reinfection after recovery. Does the model consider the possibility of reinfection? And then we're going to allow Emmanuel to ask the last question.
Yeah, so reinfection. So this is a very good question, because many countries start reopening because of the economy, as I said earlier, and then they are afraid that some reinfection might happen, at least in some areas. So far, we have observed in more than 10 countries some small reinfection. After the big peak, because I told you that there are multiple peaks. The earlier peak was not really a peak, and then you go to a big peak, and then when the curve is going down in terms of hospitalization, you might see this type of curve of some small reinfection, but this is the first peak, and this is going to be the second. But then what we have observed so far says that actually this small restart is not that big. This is what is observed from the data. Now, what the model says that it could be big depending on the response again. So it's bigger depending on the response, but if people are more responsive and more reactive, they are more careful also, then this reinfection will not go up. It will stay small, and then the hospitalization number will go down. Over.
Emmanuel?
Questions?
Emmanuel, can you speak? Okay, we're going to go to Makabongwe. You'll have to unmute your mic.
Hello, I'm not sure whether you can hear me. Makabongo from South Africa. I just want to ask, does this reinfection means it's an infection to people that haven't been infected, like those that have been indoors, for example? Or does this reinfection means to those that have recovered, they will be again be reinfected? Or it captures everything? I don't know.
Very good question. From what I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor. So what we have observed so far is that this reinfection is from those who were not infected and who go out for work, for example, because of the soft lockdown. So some people start going and working or going to market or shops. So they were not infected, and they might be exposed because of their work, and then some of them get infected. It's a new infection. It's not somebody who was previously infected, from what I know so far. I don't know if this answers to your question.
So we're going to wrap it up there. We're going to wrap it up there. Yusuf, do you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you very much, Tambin, for this very interesting presentation and very engaging. I think we had a lot of very good questions. So that's all I can say. So we'll have other seminars in line with this, and we'll build on what Tambin has just presented us today. So thank you all for attending this seminar, and hope to see you during our next seminar in 2 weeks from now, most probably. Have a good evening and have a good day.
Thank you, Tambin.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.